Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are in conversation with Shreen Abdul Sarur, activist Michael Joachim, Chairman, Prido Plantation Rural Education Development Organization, as well as Dilshan Indugawala, Coordinator of the Voice of Migrants Network. Our topic of tonight on Face the Nation is modern-day slavery. So let's start off right after the break with Shreen. Shreen, we spoke about the plantation sector workers, we spoke about migrant workers, we spoke about many other areas as well, but we did not talk about the garment sector workers as well. They are also somewhat being put under the hammer, isn't it?
Yes, so that's also another industry. So these are the three industries that, very interestingly, the industries that brings in dollars to this country, right? The tea, the garment and the migrant workers. So if you look at it, it's over 70% of the workers are women. And it doesn't have any upward mobility whatsoever. It is all in a working condition is so appalling, and we can't even say it's work because the environment itself is highly problematic, right? So in that context, the garment factory workers in Sri Lanka, and also we have garment factory workers outside. Now, today I got a news in Jordan, about over 100 of Sri Lankan workers are in bondage labor, and they have been working there for over a year, and they are not paid by this garment factory. So since we have created this trend of also sending garment factory workers abroad, it's also now becoming a problem, and it's you know, the amount of workers that we have, garment factory workers are very less comparatively as migrant workers. But in country, in Sri Lanka, we also see these garment factory workers' labor conditions being very appalling, and they live in free trade zone in very with minimum facilities, and their minimum salary sometimes 16,000 above, but when they pay their rent, their food and all those things, they are not left with anything. Therefore, some of them have to do double job, and some of them are forced into prostitution as well. Because sexual harassment is norm in the garment factories. Sri Lanka doesn't have a clear sexual harassment policy. We have been saying that we will ratify the ILO 190 convention. Our labor ministers have been hoo-ha in the parliament, but so far we have not done anything about sexual harassment at workplace, right? Garment factory.
But most of the companies in Sri Lanka, I know Sri for a fact, have brought in sexual harassment into their labor contracts, and they try to execute it. At least the blue chip companies in the country. I'm quite well aware.
Yes.
Majority of the companies are doing that.
Some of it I would say, but then not all of it. And also like the sexual harassment at workplace, there is no contract for many of these women, right? That is also one thing that we are talking about, because some of these people are subcontracted, right, to their work, and therefore there is no contract. And also if there is violation, when there is free trade zone, you can't take any action because the free trade zone is exempted from Sri Lankan normal law, legal system, right? There are BOI companies are exempted. That's why when women join labor union, now I know instances where people who, when they try to join labor union, they are being kicked out from their work. Right? And also, like you saw how they have been treated during COVID. They were having COVID, fainting. They have been given Panadol, and they have been asked to work round the clock. And then we portrayed them as the reason for the second wave of the COVID, and they were just collectively taken by the Sri Lankan military in their night dresses, taken into centers, detained, and all those things. This is how our workers are being treated. Now, if you go to free trade zone, where the boarding houses, where they are being sheltered, you see like they are living in a small, like this upcountry lion houses. It's 10 by 10 or something like that. That's where they cook. They are sharing a room with somebody, and bare minimum facilities. And then some of them have got raped while traveling. Right? Minister is talking about night shift work for women, and daytime we are being sexually harassed. in the public spaces, public buses, garment factory and everywhere. How do you expect women to work in the night in a country where every other woman is sexually harassed in this country and they don't have policies, right? So, and also women are so scared to, like I know women who have to give sexual bribery to their supervisors when their machine is broken, jockey machine is broken, in order to meet the target, otherwise she will not get the salary. She has to go and give sexual bribery for that machine to be repaired, right? So this is the condition that we are keeping our garment factory workers. We are enjoying the dollars that they are bringing in, whether it's Maleha Makkal or...
To be very honest, we cannot independently verify what you're saying. However, if what you're saying is true, the state of the...
Not only I have said, Special Rapporteur on Modern Day Slavery, who visited Sri Lanka on November 2021, his report says. I'm not saying, because we went around interviewing people, the report itself says Sri Lankan government has accepted that report. And they have said that they will fix it. This year, March, February, UPR, ICCPR, Sri Lankan government acknowledged that this is happening and they will fix it.
So, Michael, when it comes to forced child labor, that was one of the areas that Shreen spoke about before. Do you see that happening in Sri Lanka? I know prior to 2010, forced child labor was the norm in the country. People used to speak about this very vocally, about child labor in the country. But since 2010, I have not really heard about these claims coming out, because it seems there's a government regulated program that is on the way, that those who are below 16 years of age cannot be taken into the work space if they're on contract labor, and if so, they can only be used on Saturday and Sundays. And if you're above 18 years old, only you can work as contract labor or other labor in any factories. So do you see this happening in Sri Lanka even now when you speak about child labor?
Basically, I would say things have improved, in the sense now there was a time when the plantation child was seen as a child who was groomed to be a domestic worker. But then things have really changed. With education being given, education facilities being given, things have changed. And then children being employed from the plantation or elsewhere had significantly reduced. But after the economic crisis, we again see children are dropping out from school and then being either brought to Colombo or to work in areas. But this is again becoming a sort of a crisis in the future, because...
No, but you see a lot of children are now educated. They know if they are being used for some work, they can reach out to the Women's and Child, the NCPA, the National Child Protection Authority, and voice their concerns. And I must say the NCPA has done a fairly good job over the last few years to nab those who are corrupt. There are issues, there are teething problems, but the NCPA also has done a lot of work in this regard. So is that something that you see a silver lining as far as the child labor factors are concerned?
Yes, because we have also seen a number of NGOs doing child right programs where they have children clubs, train the children in children rights, and then we see children becoming aware of when the rights have been violated, contacting the women's and children desk in the police, or having contact with the police. So things have really changed.
Yeah,
but what I'm trying to say is, with the economic crisis, there is a danger of children being employed is increasing. That is, there is a danger now.
Also, Shamir, the survey by the Department of Census and Statistics has shown that throughout the country, 55% of households are reporting that the schooling of children has been negatively affected, mainly because parents can't get their children to school, not in a school van, not on motorcycles, and of course they can't even think of tuition classes anymore. So all that will inevitably lead to less educated children in our country. So that issue will come up, and less educated means that they will probably not be able to get good jobs, whatever jobs there are in this terrible economy now. Yes, there's quite a lot to go on here because of the economic crisis. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I agree with this because we see there's a lot of children being dropping out from school, and where the parents have to opt who has to go for school and who has to drop out. So that's really happening. I have seen this in the plantation. Last year, just because that they were unable to get their exercise books, children were not going to school. So we had to organize other people, donors, to come and then give them the exercise book and then ensure that they go to school. So this economic crisis, the more the economic crisis continues, there's a danger of children being dropping out from school, and then and that also may be leading to children being employed.
Yeah, but when it comes to the estate sector, Neeraj, I must tell you, in the early 90s, when I used to visit Nuwara, I could see a lot of plantation sector workers plucking tea leaves, but you don't see that anymore.
Yeah.
At least there seems to be a migration from plantation sector workers to those getting higher jobs or being paid well, being educated. And you see that labor transition also taking place in Sri Lanka, which is good news. That means there are educated populace that is being developed in the estate sector as well, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah. Actually, but there is also, don't forget that there's also internal migration of youth getting out of the plantation because they don't see the plantation work as something, a dignified work that they should do. So that there is internal migration. Now I must tell you something. Last year, I think beginning of this year in April, I went for a program where they had organized a program to felicitate children who had passed and then we are going to join the universities. I found at least 3 families having twins. Every twin is going to enter the university, but then I was wondering how they are going to even support one child. But that's why you see on one side the development that has taken place. 3 families out of about 40 children, 3 twins, 3 set of twins are ready to go to the. So they were asking how are we going to send these children. So we had to definitely drop one and then send the other.
Thank God I was a twin and, and I never had to face such a predicament. Thank God. So, Dilshani, we are getting some questions from our viewers tonight. I want to pose this question to you. There are certain companies in Sri Lanka that delay payment by over 2 months, forcing workers to take high interest loans from loan sharks. Why is the Labour Minister not looking into these matters?
So this microcredit thing is a bit of a menace, and I think in some instances they are also connected to these agencies as well. So once a family takes loans and they can't pay, then they are connected to these agencies, and the agencies go and talk to them to migrate. Because when one domestic worker migrates, I think an employer pays to almost 800,000 to 1 million rupees for one domestic worker. So that expenditure is solely borne by the employer. So that's a lot of money to our country as well. So I think everybody should be aware, including the government. They should take some action about this, because this microcredit has become a huge issue. Providing them 3-wheelers or things that they don't want, televisions, things that they want. It's a huge issue that has happened, and most of these people who migrate are because of these debts that they have taken.
So, Tarun, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Or else we can move forward.
One for Shreen, if it's
yeah,
okay?
of course, yes.
All right. Shreen, you said that in the garment sector, that those young women have to sometimes even sexually bribe their bosses for something as simple as getting the juki machine repaired. What are the barriers that are there in reporting such cases, and how can that system be improved?
It's very extremely difficult because the shame attached to it. Because, I mean, good thing about Sri Lanka right now is that at least there is an acknowledgement that there is sexual bribery, right? We have done a study. Sexual bribery is everywhere. Sri Lanka is a corrupt country, right? That's how we come to this stage. And so when women don't have money to pay, they are being asked to give their bodies, right? So in that context only, so now our anti-corruption law has a separate recognition with regard to sexual bribery. There is definition and so there is recognition. State has recognized that there is sexual bribery in this country, right? So it's the shame attached to it. Now, if it is a rape, then you go and complain, at least to a certain extent, even though the system does not work and there is social ostracization and all. But, you know, the bribery is something that you give in order to get some service done. But it's a power relationship at the end of the day. Somebody in power is demanding you in order for you to get your wage or your performance appraised or promotion or things like that. Now, same thing happens with regard to not only the garment factory, but also various other sectors that we have seen that women are forced to give sexual bribery, right? Some of these women said that even when they travel, the bus conductor from the free trade zone to their house, because they go very late in the night, right? They are asked for sexual bribery because they can't pay some amount or whatever they're asking. They would have borrowed some money for emergency and all those things, and so then they have to give it. So in that context, it's extremely difficult. The other thing is, every time a woman talks about sexual harassment or sexual bribery, there is that test whether she is telling the truth or not, right? Even rape, there is that test that she has to pass. So it's extremely difficult for anybody to talk about it. Even migrant workers, women who are raped, who actually, the third secretary who asked for sexual bribery came back, but she told us, don't tell anybody. We wanted to file a police case, but it was extremely difficult for us to go to police because this woman is so worried about her future, and we completely understand that part of it. So therefore, most of the sexual bribery cases don't get reported at all. Even if it gets reported, it gets shut down at the police station itself, because the police will then start using that woman. You have come with this complaint, then he will start calling her in the night, and then that will be another form of harassment, right? So it's extremely difficult for women to come up and talk about this issue.
Also, the inability to present proof in such situations could make the case even worse.
And also there is already an assumption that who this woman is, sexually abused woman is, there is a judgment.
She gets labeled.
Yes, labeled.
All right.
Right, Niresh?
Yes, so one point there, Shreen, is that we have very low women's representation in political authority, whether it is your Pradesh Sabha or municipal council or up to the to parliament itself. So that needs to be corrected, and of course to do that we need elections. So
yes, definitely.
Hopefully next year we will see elections, and the hope is that there will be more women's representation there.
So she talked about the migrant workers' voting rights. We don't have absentee ballots in this country. So these migrant workers are roughly about 7% of our voting population, right? They are not voting, but they are contributing to the economy of the country, but they are not. The recent statistics, you all would have undergone this. I had to argue with the people who came for statistics. They said if somebody does not live in the house for 6 months, that migrant worker is not even included in our statistics. What are we doing? What are we doing to these workers? Because it is political rights. It's not only participation, becoming politician, but also exercising your voting rights as a citizen of the country. We are denouncing these people as not even a citizen of this country. So it's very important that if one fine day, migrant workers get together and send one woman migrant worker to the parliament, that will be wonderful, because that woman knows what to do with this particular sector, because nobody seems to know what to do with this.
Yeah, but let's talk about the way forward. I want to give each speaker the final round to speak about what is the way forward, because we speak about the problems. And we all know what these problems are. But now let's talk about a way forward. What must we do to arrest these problems? So let's start off with Dilshani.
So like Mr. Joachim said, this is an industry. We need to develop this industry, and all stakeholders should come together to develop this industry. And to do so, we also must understand who the migrant worker is and who's actually contributing to our country. And like I started this to say that migrant workers are the lifeline of this economy. So start off, we need to provide, to recognize them, we need to give them the voting access. Because if they are sending us money, they should have the decision to choose the correct people to run this country with the money that they are sending. That is one. Second thing is, Voice of Migrants Network, we organize workers for them to voice their concerns. They have to have a platform where they are heard. They need to voice their concerns, because most of the time all these issues come to play when
but Dilshan, just to interrupt you there for a second, do you agree with Shreen? I know Shreen was very vocal about garment sector workers and so on and so forth, but I know for a fact that most of the reputed brands in Sri Lanka are being governed by their principles. Yes. If you talk about companies like Nike or Victoria's Secret or the big brands, Adidas, all these are governed by their principles. So in the garment sector, reputed companies, I don't think are resorting to such practices, do they?
So
because
we are
you can always report back to those companies, and these companies, I know for a fact, take labor rights very, very seriously.
But the problem is, like, we are a country, we hide behind culture, right? And like Shreen said, like, if I'm sexually abused, what am I gaining with my perpetrator going to jail? What am I gaining out of it? I'll be labeled, I'll be called, various names. My children are going to be affected. My family is going to be affected by this. What am I gaining out of it? Nothing. It's just that there is a lot of shame and stigma involved in it. So, like, we handle a lot of victims that are trafficked as well as abused, but they don't want to come forward. They don't want to come forward because what they say is, now I'm out of it, I want to live my life. So even, there are laws and policies and, whatnot in place. Like Shreen said, those workers will not come forward because
there
they're
can be instances where a female, I understand where you're coming from, a female wouldn't want to come and voice their opinion because it might not just affect her now, it might affect her marriage, it might affect her future.
For a lifetime.
It's a lifetime. That's a lifetime.
Yes. Even if my grandchild is going to get married, it's going to come out and they are going to talk about the grandmother being abused and things like that. Yeah. So nobody would want to come because that happens in the, a public transport. Like how many women are getting abused, but nobody will want to talk about it. So,
and we see a lot of instances where women are being abused in private buses, public buses, and all the commuters don't do anything about it.
Then the other thing is the other cumbersome procedures to complain about it. How many police officers do you have to tell your story to, go and get it reported or
and there have been instances where when you go to complain to the police, they take advantage of you as well.
Of course.
So this is all the culture that Rani was talking about.
This is the culture that we are having. So, and we are also, we like to live with what we have. We are I think we are a nation that, forgets and we enjoy and just, okay, this is what, what we say is this is our fate, and then we live with it. So I think the workers should stand up for their rights. They should voice their concerns and not expect others to, always, give anything in a platter. That has never happened. Workers haven't got their rights on a platter. So they have to. So these migrant workers, so even the returnees that are in these migrant societies, it's commendable because they might not migrate again. They're doing all that voluntarily, and they're working, supporting the potential migrant workers, supporting the families that are left behind, looking after the children that are left behind.
So we're getting a lot of conflicting opinions from our viewers as well. So one viewer had said, The principals interview the employees periodically, confidentially, and the girls are happy. And factory owners are very, very concerned in situations like that. We respect everyone's opinion. That is why we are having this discourse.
Yes.
And I try to take your comments and your observations as much as possible as far as it's constructive to the dialogue that we are having on the show tonight. So Dilshani, in conclusion, what must the Sri Lankan government do?
In conclusion, I think not only the Sri Lankan government, but the community, the media, everybody involved should recognize these workers, recognize what they are doing for the country, and give them the proper recognition when it comes to their rights and their welfare.
Thank you very much, Dilshan Nagola, Coordinator, Voice of Migrants Network, Michael Joachim, Chairman of PRIDO.
Basically, I would say creating public awareness is one of the important things that should happen. And then the workers need to be organized, and then facilities given for them to sort of organize themselves and demand for their rights. I'll give you a simple example. As I said last on the 18th, we had the Migrants Day when the minister was there, and then the migrant societies organized signature campaign where they wanted bureau office in Nuwara. And the children got involved, because children were also aware that how the parents are being affected when you don't have services which are accessible to them. So they were also demanding for the bureau office. On the stage, the children presented the memorandum to the minister. He was so taken up and then simply couldn't refuse the demand of the children. He immediately ordered the bureau officers to open the bureau office on the 7th of January in Nuwara. So what I'm trying to say
I
is,
just hope they open it.
no, it will no. Let us all. We are just this. That's a promise.
We've seen all these promises.
Given,
yeah,
and of course we will be following it up.
Yeah, we will see promises being made by politicians.
That's right. Yes, I know.
Every single time, but all these promises are not realistically implemented.
But
let's hope so.
But what's important is to make people more and more aware. I think media has a lot to play in this. What are the areas that you give importance? How do you sort of make people aware on certain issues, particularly as to how the community need to pressurize the policy makers, and also ensure that the policy makers get the contributions of the people concerned, whether it's migrant or other workers. The policies need to be made with the collaboration, contribution with the purpose, with the people with whom those decisions is going to be affected. So I think that if that happens, the changes will come.
We'll at least see some silver lining.
That's right.
As far as the tunnel is concerned. So let's move to Shreen Abdul Sarur, activist.
So Sri Lanka Foreign Employment Bureau has 7 men. At least out of that, 4, they have to give way to 4 women, right? Because this migrant worker industry is mainly women, right? They should be, like the political representation, every possible way, women's participation at the top ranking level is very important, because then we understand what is happening to our women, right? Then Sri Lankan Foreign Employment Bureau, if at all, it has to reform, because it has become an excuse for even our embassy officers to not to discharge their duty towards their citizens, right? Sri Lanka has, I mean, we are part of Vienna Convention. It very clearly states that when somebody gets into trouble, our citizens, it is our foreign ministries, the mission's responsibility to repatriate and make sure that they are safe and all those things. Now, time and time again, there is this excuse of calling on to Sri Lankan Foreign Employment Bureau, and then that doesn't work because that is part of the agencies. So that need to completely change. Sri Lankan government has to take responsibility for its citizens and make sure that people are safe. There should be effective bilateral agreement. Particularly when we send our migrant workers abroad, we have to be very careful of where we are sending them. We are sending them to places where there aren't much labor protection, right? And we need to make sure that when we send these women or men, we need to make sure that they are skilled enough to deliver the job. Then with regard to garment factory and the tea upcountry Maleha Makkal, At least the 200 years there is recognition, and we need more recognition in our budget with regard to the allocation, health, their well-being, their land, their housing and everything. And I hope next few years this will improve, because India has stepped in mega way, so that at least somehow fix this problem. With regard to garment factory, Sri Lanka is reviewed for GSP+. And next year, all the countries will be reviewed. So Sri Lanka has to be very careful, because we lost once the GSP+. We can't continue to have this appalling condition of the workers. And Sri Lanka has been reviewed time and time again by international bodies. We are also party because we have signed the conventions, including the Migrant Worker Convention. And one Sri Lankan representative is part of the working group, our former diplomat, right? So we need to make sure that we protect our people's rights and we put end to this human trafficking. But particularly with regard to this crisis time, our workers need that respect and that decent work and decent living. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shreen Abdul Sarur, activist. Thank you very much, Michael Joachim, Chairman of PREDO, Plantation Rural Education Development Organization, Dilshan Indigovilla, Coordinator of the Voice of Migrants Network. Thank you very much, Theruni. Thank you very much, Niresh, for joining us this evening on the show. Niresh is the consultant English news director at Newsfirst. Theruni is a young, budding journalist at Newsfirst as well. So nice to have the two of you tonight on the show as we close our shows for 2023. Next year, we'll be meeting you on Wednesday. It's going to be a brand new year. Let's hope for the best. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. Nobody's free until everybody is free. May you have a wonderful 2024. Take care and good night.